everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hunt with D podcast. I'm your host, Luke. Running solo today. Our guest is the CEO and founder of C&H Precision, avid PRS shooter, Marine Corps veteran, and newly transitioned bow hunter, Buck Hawley. How's it going, Buck?
Man, it's great. On take 3, we're rolling now.
Got my kids screaming in the background.
We're dealing with some flooding post Hurricane Debbie. Like, it came through. I was still abroad in China, and I hear all this weather, and I come home and I land, and it's sunny and looked like nothing happened. And then all the floodwaters came down. You know, we live on a river, and the river went up, 10 feet. So we got a bunch of employees that we're dealing with them. They're absent today, trying to get them, make sure their houses are clean and dry. And but other than that, everybody's fine.
That's good to hear. Yeah, that storm. I was actually down in Florida when it was rolling up the coast, and it looked like it was going to hit us. I was on the beach and Seaside, and it ended up heading east and just missed us. But I know a lot of people got pretty slammed by it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. We've been talking now for almost a year, and I'm glad that we have finally been able to link up and discuss all things hunting, lifting, eating, shooting, harvesting. What a great bunch of guys you have on staff and followers. I'm really appreciative of being invited to be with you.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge to get our schedules to sync up. I feel like we've both been traveling all over the place, but it's been a long time coming, and let's jump right into it. So let's roll it back a little bit. I know you've been on a lot of adventures across the country here, and we'll get to that. But let's kind of backtrack to kind of how you grew up and what was your relationship with the outdoors as a kid, and was this something that you developed early on, or did you come into hunting and the outdoors later in life?
Being born and raised in Alaska, my earliest childhood memories, even the ones that I don't remember, there's multiple pictures that you can go back into my baby album of when I was a toddler, not even walking. My parents took care of a lodge. I don't even know where it is, somewhere in remote Alaska. And they would have to kill or harvest a moose, butcher it, and they ate off of it for months at a time. Airplanes would drop in supplies, food and toilet paper, etc. And hearing my parents tell these stories of running out of rolling paper, cigarette, and they had tobacco, but they didn't have rolling papers. They'd experiment with newspapers and toilet paper, and so from a very young age, Alaska was my home and upbringing. At a young age, we then moved to where my mom was from in central Minnesota. So we moved from a cold state to a colder state. But everybody on my mom's side of the family, as my dad's family, was completely engrossed in the outdoors. It was duck hunting. It was trapping muskrats and beavers. It was duck hunting, goose hunting, deer hunting. And we had a large acreage up in the very northern part of Minnesota, which we called the cabin. It was about a 6-hour drive. And 3, 4, 5 times a year, we'd all go up there, ride 4-wheelers, ride 3-wheelers, clear trails, put in food plots. So my entire life has really revolved around the outdoors and harvesting and hunting and eating wild game. So it's not new for me. Then I joined the military. I spent 9 years active duty, got to travel around quite a bit, see the way other people do things, exposes you to a lot of things, which is how I got involved in precision rifle. Did that for many years. So, to answer your question, it's been a lifelong pursuit of chasing wild animals and harvesting them and eating them and building memories. I mean, I somebody asked me this weekend, why I travel all over the world hunting and shooting. And I can honestly say it's not so much for the trophy picture or the trophy that you put on the wall or the meat that you eat. It's the relationships and the memories that you make. I've got so many great stories, not of the pursuit, but the everything that leads up to the pursuit, and then post the celebration, the eating fresh steaks. That those are the memories that you create forever. And what I'm trying to do is bring that to more people by inviting them to go hunting, inviting them. We're arranging a trip for next year to bring several fathers and their kids to Africa on a once in a lifetime hunting opportunity. Make it affordable, but make it fun. They'll remember that story for the rest of their life, but they'll probably never remember the time that they went to Disney.
Yeah, 100%. The relationship surrounding this passion, it's kind of core to who we are as a company. We're all built around community, and that was something that I found. And I was fortunate enough before I transitioned out. I finaled out in May, so as you can see with the beard, I'm done now. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall for myself of like losing the boys, losing that community that we have in the military and those relationships and having guys all around you. And I made a lot of mistakes in my life, but one of the smarter things I did was start to build this company because it replaced that. My transition, it hasn't been that long yet, but it seemed pretty seamless because the parallels between the camaraderie in hunting camp and the camaraderie in the military and the stories and the ribbing each other and all that, it feels the same, and it's almost better because you get to choose who you're going to camp with versus, in the military, you're stuck with a bunch of folks that you might like half of them, you might hate the other half, and it's I've seen that. I mean, was that, I find that it's kind of like some guys come out of the military, then they find hunting, and then a lot of hunters are drawn to the military. Was there a parallel there that kind of led you down that path when you decided to go in?
Uh, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I joined the military. I didn't have a passion for serving. I'm be completely transparent. I didn't have a better option. I can remember I was working for a farmer named Harlan Anderson, and we raised alfalfa for the horse track in Minneapolis. I think it was called Canterbury Downs. We raised corn and wheat and some oats, but primarily it was sod and alfalfa. And I was a terrible student. I was an absolute abomination of a student. I think that they graduated me just because they didn't want me to come back. Um, and I was coming from a broken home, so I was on the farm more than I was on at school. And Harlan Anderson, who was a veterinarian and a successful farmer, I asked him one day, or he asked me, one or the other, he's like, "What are you going to do next year?" I was like, "I don't know." And he says, "Well, I'm going to boil it down for you real easy. You got about three choices. You can go to school or you can go to college. But do you have any money? No. Did you take your SATs, your ACTs? Yeah, didn't do very good." He says, "Well, then college is not an option for you because they're not going to let you in. You're not going to be able to pay for it." Okay, good. And he says, "You could stay here and work on the farm." And he points, and there was my coworker. He was about 10 years older than me. His name was John Aho, and they called him Thud. And he had tobacco stained beard and jacked up teeth and drove an old piece of crap Dodge pickup truck. And he goes, "Well, you can stay here and work for me, and you're going to be just like Thud." I was like, "Oh, that's not a good option." He said, "Or you should probably consider joining the Marine or the military." And he goes, "I know your dad was a Marine. Maybe you should follow in his footsteps." And I was like, "Okay, let's go see a recruiter." And like 3 months later, I was gone. So it wasn't like I didn't grow up thinking I love the outdoors. I'm going to follow my passion and join the military. It was the only option I had. And I like to tell people, I don't have a Marine Corps hat, a Marine Corps bumper sticker, a shirt. I don't have the red jacket, none of that crap. Those were not the best years of my life. I mean, I'm a patriot and I love my service, but that's not what defines me. And I don't always, I feel sorry for some people who that that can't get away from that lifestyle. I think it's a great foundation for a lot of people, but after that, you got to find your rhythm, you've got to find what your destiny is and not let it be defined by just those few years that you were active duty. Um I mean, there's a lot of people you probably seen it, and this will be controversial. There's a lot of people that just, they wear their service on their bumper and on their shirt and on their hat, and good for you. But I hope that everybody has the ability to go out there and use that experience to make a better life for themselves and their family. Use that discipline, use that knowledge, and create something even better that you will be more proud of. That people around you, I mean, people don't come up to me and congratulate me for your stellar 9 years of service, but they do come up to me and thank me for being an entrepreneur, being a businessman, creating 50 or 60 jobs, keeping jobs in the community, and making great product. That is my legacy and an adventure. This all kind of comes together: entrepreneurial, inventor, make great product. And I like to see myself as the cool uncle who's always doing cool stuff to motivate other dudes to bring their kids to go do cool stuff and show them that it's possible. I mean, you don't have to be a millionaire to go to Africa to hunt. In fact, I encourage everybody to go to Africa to hunt, because you're going to spend the same amount of money that you would spend to fly out to the West Coast, to go to Montana, Idaho, and go chase a elk or a mule deer or a moose. The same price that you're going to pay for all those tags and all that airfare and all the hotels and camping and all that stuff, you can do it for the same price. You can go to Africa and you can probably shoot 2 or 3 or 4 times as many animals and see some amazing stuff that you've never seen in your life.
Yeah, the price, people think it's pretty cost prohibitive, but I've talked to several outfitters. When you look at and break it down and what's included, it's cheaper than most elk hunts if you're going to do a guided elk hunt, and you can kill 3 to 6 different animals and have that interaction, which is really cool. But before we get to the Africa stuff, let's you're talking about the entrepreneurship, and so let's kind of roll into there. What was that transition like as you transitioned out of the Marine Corps? I know you went and did some other government stuff, which we can go into or gloss over wherever you're at with it. But what kind of led you down the path of entrepreneurship? What was your interest? You said you were a shitty student. I went to college, but I was not supposed to graduate. They same deal. They forced me through. I think they just wanted me to get out of there. I didn't meet the minimum requirements. So my commission is I always joked that it was a farce, but, there seems to be some parallels that a lot of poor students end up going down the entrepreneurship route because you kind of go marching to the beat of your own drum. Is that something you kind of had designs on early, or did you just kind of come into that throughout your journey out of the Marine Corps?
Well, I can honestly say that I never anticipated being a business guy. I didn't, again, I didn't set out one day to say, I didn't ever want to be in the military, but I ended up there. I didn't ever see myself being a businessman. I always thought I'd be a 9 to 5 employee kind of guy. But after I left active duty, I served as a contractor for a couple different agencies and in different roles: science and technology and force modernization. And when I first started that, there was not a lot of people doing it. There was a lot of money, a lot of funding to go do projects. And towards the end, there were a lot of people doing it, and there was not a lot of money. So in the beginning, we like to say in the beginning, there was a few people doing it and money was no object. At the end, in the beginning, we spent 5% of our time seeking funding from different organizations or reviewing projects. What do we want to work on? How do we want to work on it? How do we want to solve it? Towards the end, it was the exact opposite. There was so many people wanting to do it. The funding had literally just dried up or become harder to get. Then you spent 95% of your time seeking funding and projects to work on, and only 5% of the time fixing a problem. So that was kind of the calling. Then when Extortion 17 happened, several great friends of mine were on that airship when it went down. It was a really sad moment in my life, and I can honestly say that really made me take back and reevaluate where am I going in life and what do I want to do and how do I want to serve my country, my family. And it was at that time I decided to leave the contracting world, leave the government world, and go do something else. And at that point, I was knee deep into bullet design, trajectory, ballistics, calculators, rifle scopes. And I was like, this seems like a great path. Me and my buddy Dave Clark, let's start a company and we just build precision rifles and then we shoot competitively to promote them, and that's what we're going to do. And I had a goal. My goal at that time was if we can form a company, we can build rifles and shoot. And if I can make $80,000 a year and be home every night to raise my third child, I didn't want to deploy. I didn't want to be on the road 300 days a week or 300 days a year. If I can just be home for her and raise her the right way, $80,000 will be enough. And then things happened. Things evolved. We made rifles for a couple years, and then the thing that really kicked this off was the day that a good buddy of mine that worked at Glock called in 2014, said they were getting ready to go to SHOT Show in 2015 and they needed these little parts and they wanted to know if I could make some. And he said, "Can you build me 25?" I built 25. I sent them to him. I made another 25 thinking that it would turn into something. And 25 turned into make 50, make 50, make 100. And now we make 4 or 5 or 6,000 optic mounting plates a week. This has allowed me professionally to branch out and hire more people, be more of an entrepreneur, start new companies, acquire new companies. Now I kind of get to be a bulldog in business and teach people how to aggressively and assertively project forward. So now I'm getting to use a little bit of the military service, the discipline, the knack of getting stuff done. So again, military wasn't ever my dream. Entrepreneurship wasn't ever my dream. I didn't know that I could do it. But now that I've proven that I can do it, I'm consistently and often promoting other people follow that path. If you have a dream or a passion or a hobby, if you think you can make a go of it, go for it. Don't let anybody, I encourage people, don't let anybody to stand in your way. And to your point earlier, you said, you're afraid of leaving the boys, that camaraderie, that little team, the little unit. I really find that a lot of those guys in my past, at least, whether we're in the same unit or we knew each other very closely, those are also some of the people that you got to get away from because they're very quick to tell you, no, that's not going to work. Oh, that's dumb. Oh, that's stupid. If I would have listened to a bunch of my friends, starting a rifle building company was dumb and stupid. Probably making these pistol plates might have been dumb or stupid. And these people are so important to you coming out of the military that oftentimes you take what they have to say. Their opinion matters. But I encourage people to form new friendships and new alliances with people that are already where you want to be. Your former service members there's a lot of them that are not entrepreneurs. So why would you listen to them about being an entrepreneur? I don't know a whole lot of military people that are phenomenal at business administration. I mean, they a lot of them take orders really well. So they're not necessarily the people that I would listen to about forming a business. If you want that experience to be able to form a business and make good business decisions, you'd be much better off going to your local coffee shop and listening to the old farmers and some of the entrepreneurs that are sitting at breakfast and discussing with them how you got here, what what hiring and firing mistakes did you make? What accounting software problems did you run into? These are all lessons and tidbits that many entrepreneurs and business guys need to learn, but you only learn those lessons from either A, doing it yourself and messing up and figuring it out, or learning it from other entrepreneurs and other business people who aren't always willing to share. I am.
Well, we appreciate that. And I think to your point, I mean, if I had listened to folks that were super close to me, friends, family, when, I had threw some logos on t-shirts, everybody was like, what are you doing? You're just wasting your time. My wife and I got in a fight about the initial investment on the sewing machine that I bought, that I sewed the first patches on the hats with. And like, obviously she's full bore and is part of the company and helps me now. But when people haven't been where you want to go, it's hard for them because they don't see it. They don't see that same vision that you have in your head. They don't know what you're looking at. They don't have all the information, and people get kind of indoctrinated in this journey that a lot of people in society do. You go to a career, you go to college, have your career, stay in that career for a while, maybe jump companies a few times, and then you retire when you're 65. And I had what led me to entrepreneurship was several different things, but one of them was, I didn't want to wait till I was 65 to start living my life. I wanted to be able to go travel the world and go on cool hunts and meet new people and do these things. And that was a big driver for me. And it's hard when you've got your whole circle around you that's like telling you no, and you've got to be the one person that's like, nope, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And who you surround yourself with is huge. And those old relationships, some of them will last, but the more that I've gone down this path, the less and less I communicate with a lot of the people that I used to be close with. And it's not that I held any animosity. We just have drifted apart because our paths are so different. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I'm in the process of learning all that myself. And it's awesome to be able to talk to somebody who's obviously, significantly further ahead than I am. And on that, and you being willing to share, entrepreneurship gets really glamorized in social media. You see people driving around in Bugattis and drop shippers and these people that are saying they're making how much money a month, and people don't realize how shitty it can actually be. There's some really tough times. And what's one of those, an example or a story that you have of one of those times where you felt like things were kind of stacked up and you're looking down the barrel of some despair and you didn't know whether you were going to keep going or not, and like what kind of drove you to move forward through that?
Well, my favorite story that my business colleagues love to repeat when I'm sitting at dinner, and it's a little bit embarrassing, but I owe a great deal of my success today to my ex-wife. Now, it might sound weird, but when we moved our business from Florida to Georgia, we moved right here to Richmond Hill. I moved my daughter, who at the time was 1.5 or 2. No, actually she was 4. The next year she turned 5. She was starting kindergarten. So she moved when she was 4.5 or 5. And that fall she started kindergarten. So I moved them up in June. I had to wait, and I moved up in like October in 2017. As soon as I got here, got everything moved in, settled, started work. All the employees were back to work. And then I found out I was getting divorced, unfortunately. And I stuck it out at the house till Christmas, trying to figure out how to make it work. But my ex-wife was dead set that we were getting divorced. And it finally dawned, it didn't dawn on me. I just finally admitted to myself, okay, I failed at this. And the problem was I didn't have any money. At the time, her business was doing significantly better than mine. She's in public relations and media, doing a bunch of marketing and proactive marketing for very great companies. So she was doing good. My company was just barely afloat. I didn't have enough money to go rent an apartment. I didn't barely have enough money to keep the lights on at the shop and make payroll, but we were. So I made the decision to move out of the house and move into my steel building on an industrial street. And I lived in the back. I converted an office that was right next to a bathroom, that was right next to a kitchenette, and I had a hot plate, and I had a bathroom, and I had a bedroom, and I lived in that shop for 4.5 years. And what that allowed me to do, when you're in a manufacturing business, the number one expense is labor. And we needed to be running virtually 24 hours a day to keep up demand for all these little optical adapter plates that we were making. But if I had still been happily married and only working 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day, there's 8 or 10 hours of the day that I was missing because I would have been at home taking care of my wife and kid. But instead, I was at the shop, and I got my daughter every other week for a week at a time. So she lived at the shop with me for 4.5 years, every other week. And what that allowed me to do was I got really good at working the day shift, designing parts, keeping machines running, marketing, accounting. I did it all. Then when the employees went home, then I'd slip into flip-flops, a t-shirt, and some shorts, and I'd keep the machines running all evening. I'd cook some little dinner in this little kitchenette that I had, and you could hear the machines in the background running. And if ever we had, at that time, we probably had 3 machines. You could hear one of the machines. Oh, one of the machines shut down. I got to go check. Is it a broken tool? Is the cycle over? And you'd keep that joker running until 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Then you go to bed. Well, as you start to get older, dudes have to go to the bathroom once or twice at night, and you'd get up and go to the bathroom, and you'd listen. You're like, oh man, one of the machines sound, or multiple machines sound. So back out there you go at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And for 4.5 years, I worked first shift as business owner, marketing, sales, invoicing, all the stuff that you learn to be pretty good at. And then for those years, I was second shift and third shift, keeping machines going. And that work ethic, I was driving a 16-year-old Tahoe that the seats were all tore up. It's just a piece of junk. There was so much play in the steering wheel. Like if you wanted to take a left, you had to do this and then some more. And I did literally work myself to death until I got to the point where I could afford to buy a house, and I bought the biggest house in Bryan County. And then I moved there. And when I moved, I am not joking when I tell you that I couldn't sleep for the first week because it was so quiet. There wasn't machines humming in the background. There weren't sirens and alarms and lights. And I had an owl that lived in my backyard at this new house, and it sounded like he was on a microphone, a megaphone. Woo-hoo. I was like, wow, this is so quiet. Eventually that fades away and you learn to live your best life. So, I don't know where I was going with this, but that whole story of adversity and working your ass off, and you've got to put your time in now when you're young. And now I'm talking to you. Now is the time to bust your ass 24 hours a day, building brand awareness, making the right acquisition strategies where you're going to acquire employees or other companies or other affiliates, building those relationships. And then in 5 or 10 years, you'll be able to kick back and take it easy. And then you got to fight back the urge. Now that's when the haters come out. There were no haters when you were working 24 hours a day or you're working 3 shifts. Nobody hated you then. But now that you're driving, now you got you got several Porsches. You're going to the racetrack. You're going to Africa. You're going to China. You're doing all this stuff. Now the haters come out, and I'm like, where were you guys 6 years ago when I was working my butt off? You didn't say anything to me then, but now you hate me because I'm successful. And so the dynamics are always changing, and it's very interesting. But yeah, that lesson of there were many times during that period of time that I wanted to give up. But what was I going to do? I had that was my last choice. I burned the fucking boats. That's the best way to phrase that period of my time, was burn the fucking boats. There's no retreating. You can't get off the beach. You have to move forward. And I burned the boats, And we moved forward. By the grace of God, we survived. And now I'm in such a great position. Now I've got, I own 4 or 5 or 6 companies. We're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm building EV cars for the middle school STEM program to encourage them to want to pursue engineering careers in college and come back and work for people like me. You know, I live the best life now.
That's incredible. I love that story, and you said, burn the boat. Our first episode of this podcast is called Burn the Ships. And that's what we talked about. And, I had that revelation with my wife. As I was going through the transition, I was like, what am I going to do? And I finally sat there and looked at myself and was like, just do this, like I've built this while I was on active duty. It's sitting here, took a huge pay cut, and it's a lot of work. I work way more than I've ever worked in my life, but I can take 15 minutes during the day and go play with my kids. I can see my family. I can still work, and there's not really balance. I work more than I do anything else, but I have no other choice but to go forward now. And that level of motivation just kind of propels you to the next level. But that's probably one of the harder leaps to make, especially if you have a family and you're trying to provide and do these things. It's not easy. And how did was that, I'm assuming like with where you were at, that was probably a big driving factor for you, is like you had the kids, you had the family, you've got to make this work. You're committed. You've got employees. You've got all this responsibility. What is that conversation to yourself look like when the responsibilities start mounting up and the stress of that? Because what I've found is it's one thing when it's my family that's dependent on me, but then as I've started to start projecting, as we look at long-term employment, and then we've got folks relocating to where we're coming to, it gets even more stressful exponentially when you've got other people. So, what does that look like for you? Because at the level that you guys are.
It was a struggle in the beginning. And now I'm putting my coaching hat on to talk about entrepreneur and business. The hardest part that you will face in your career, in your young career in this new business, is you have to leverage. You have the ability to put a lot of time and effort into this, and everything that you do is the right way because it's your way, it's your company, it's your brand. So you can do no wrong. But soon you're going to get to the point where you no longer have enough time and you have to hire people. And these were my biggest mistakes. I knew I couldn't do it all and I had to hire people. But at the time, I had limited resources. So I was hiring the best person that I could afford, which wasn't very much. And we made some bad hires. Not because they were bad people. They were just either really young, inexperienced. They didn't have the drive. They didn't have the determination. They didn't have the work ethic. And a business can survive one or two of those people in an organization about our size of, 50 people. But many more than that, they become a cancer. And you've got to cut the cancer out. And what I always tell people, I was just having a conversation with a stock manufacturing company in Oklahoma. It's a husband and wife, and they're busting at the seams trying to hire. And what I told them just this past weekend was hire the person based on the qualifications that you need today and a year or two in the future, and then figure out how to afford them. Do not hire the person who fits into your budget, because right now your budget for the person that you want to hire is lower than what you want. So you're trying to hire a person for today to fix this problem today. And let's say that the budget and the experience is this much to fix the job today, but in a year from now, the experience level and the cost of that person is going to be up here, because if they do their job right, they're going to help grow the company. But they've outgrown their position, or the position has outgrown them, actually. So what I always tell people is, instead of either buying the machine or hiring the person that you need today, buy the machine and hire the person that you need 12, 18, 24 months from now. They're going to come with a paycheck or a salary that's commensurate with 12 or 18 months from now. But if you don't do this, you're going to wake up in 12 or 18 months like, either I need another person or I need a better person, because the role has outgrown this person's capability. People don't rise to the occasion. They fall back to their training level or their what they know. And the business is going to keep growing. If you're successful and the business is going to keep growing, you need that person to be able to take on more things, or you need that machine. Say I made the mistake of buying a whole bunch of CNC machines that fit the purpose that I needed today. Well, you know what happens 12 months and 18 months? You're selling those brand new machines that were brand new a year ago because they can't keep up, and you're reinvesting in some bigger machines. And that's where I learned first 3 or 4 machines we bought were good enough for today, but fast forward, they weren't good enough. So the second and third time I bought machines, I bought them for what I needed in the future so that I could grow into that capacity. And that's really what saved us during the COVID days. Was for some, again, God reached down and blessed me and said, son, the next couple machines that you're going to buy are going to be way too big for you right now. But then COVID happened and our business took off, and we had bought options on material for a year ahead of time. So we got material at great pricing. We had machines that we could run lights out, just running. And if we hadn't made those decisions earlier in 2018 and 2019, we'd still be a small company.
That's great insight there, and it's that forward looking, which I think the role of like the CEO always has to be in. It's a hard balance because I'm a very aggressive person, and I think I did that probably too much throughout our growth. I almost ran us off the rails a couple of times with the spending. But you still have to be looking forward, because if you don't, then you're just hemorrhaging that capital on that short-term basis. And like, it's cool that you're saying all this, because this is literally the lessons that I'm going through right now, and I'm slowly learning. And so it's great to hear it, from your end. Yeah, the money thing is probably the hardest part for me. I've learned how to make it. Now it's learning how to not spend it all on the back end, and where to manage it and how to do all that. That's really what the biggest constraint that we're having across the board. It's those decision points of what that ROI for this dollar spent, and being more deliberate. And I'm a big gut instinct guy. And now it's like getting into the numbers, looking at the numbers, actually like there's an art and a science to it. And that's what I'm learning. I kind of focused more on the art of a lot of it, and now I'm trying to delve into the science of the entire thing.
Well, it's funny. I'm going to touch on one thing for you and anybody else here that's a young entrepreneur, etc. If you're in the defense industry or you're in the firearms industry, the archery industry, your first instinct is, hey, I've got this product. Hey, we're going to build these little products, and we're going to market them, and suddenly, typically through your old friendships, you've got all these guys that are match directors at, whether it's an archery competition, a pistol competition, a rifle competition. And they're like, oh, dude, you can get some great exposure at our match. And if you sponsor the match and you're a stage sponsor at one of the stages, or I'm going to tell you what, from a marketing perspective, you really have to be diligent about recognizing how you're spending your marketing budget. Everybody's going to hit you up for a sponsorship. Oh, for $500, you will put your vinyl banner on the fence when at registration, so people can see it. Do you know how many pistol parts I've sold because I put up a vinyl banner? Probably less than one. People do not buy guns, accessories, etc., because you put up a vinyl banner at a match. Now, coming from the Precision Rifle series, they put banners up on fences, they put banners up at stages, and they put your name in a match book. Nobody Nobody buys stuff because you sponsored a match. Nobody buys stuff from me because I put stuff on a prize table. So we've really pulled that back from people. And I've got a bunch of flack from my friends who run matches like, "Oh, you don't support us anymore." Well, here's the deal. Those matches don't support me. They don't support my hard-earned dollar. So what I've done is said, "Listen, I'm willing to support you in your match, but here's what you're going to do. You, the match director, are going to sign up as an affiliate with me. You're going to get a code. So every time you're pushing my content out leading up to the match, there's a link. I can see how well that link does, because if anybody's really paying attention and they go to my website and they use your code, which, oh, by the way, you, the match director, get a small portion, 5, 6, 7, 8%, then you're getting paid for doing advertising. Number two, I will only do this if you become an affiliate, so you're vested in my company, and I get the roster, all the names, cell phones, and emails from all the attendees of your event. Why? It's important for me as our email distribution list grows. I want to proactively market to these people. I want to send them a personalized email before they get to the match that says, "Hey, you're coming up to the K&M Pro-Am up in Finger, Tennessee. We look forward to seeing you. We're going to be on stage, whatever, sponsoring it. Stop by and say hi and get a coupon code for X." Now we're proactively marketing to these people. If people are just asking you for money or sponsorships without giving you data and direct access to those customers, then that's not marketing, that's charity. And so tell them no. Spend your money else other places. We had an AM radio station locally here years ago call us and like, "Hey, you'd be great to put on a commercial." I'm like, "Okay, how many I forget what the terminology is, but how many looks or how many touch points do you get?" "Well, we don't really know. We don't have any way to track who listens to radio." I said, "So you can't even tell me how big your audience is? If they can't tell you how many big their audience is, how many interactions they have on social media, how many looks, whatever, again, it's not marketing, it's charity. So avoid it. Put your money, find those opportunities where you can co-op a relationship where you're doing a giveaway. We just did one with Taurus. We put some product in there. Taurus put a pistol. There was 10 other manufacturers, and everybody shared it, and everybody gets to share the user data. So our email list is growing. You might not sell a product today because you partnered with Taurus and these 10 other companies, but you might get 50,000 email addresses that you can proactively email to in the future. That's important, not a vinyl banner.
Oh, that's great stuff. And I mean, I'm running into all of that right now. It's, I get reached out to, I don't know, a couple dozen times a week, support this, support that. And I want to support, people, and I want to do these things, but it's hard. And especially with its, organizations and missions that I'm both on the nonprofit side and the for-profit side, but it gets really tight. And that's something that I probably bled out a little bit last year trying to support too much. And that's a lesson that I've been learning. But I love that idea of, negotiating on the backside to get those email lists, to get all that contact, to set up the affiliate links. I mean, that makes total sense. And that also applies for when we're doing events and we're trying to bring in sponsors, is we can build that package that way. So it's more enticing for those sponsors to where they're getting that hard data. They can track, they can see, we can get that feedback from them. So then we know how to improve the marketing if we build it long-term. So I love all that, Buck. But let's the majority of our audience is definitely tied in on the hunting side. I know several, we talk entrepreneurship a lot on here, but let's shift over to the hunting. And let's talk a little bit with, PRS going out. We actually met through Kiefer, who guided you on an aoudad hunt. And he still talks about you guys out there and just knowing you're dope and calling out everything and just the shots you guys were taking and how awesome that is. And to my understanding, you're very experienced on that long range shooting, and so that led you down to wanting to get into archery. So kind of talk a little bit about the PRS stuff and the long range marksmanship, and then we'll transition over into your kind of most current hunting pursuits.
Well, I'll tell you, PRS is a fantastic fundamental builder to teach you how to shoot. You know, you leave military service and you think you're Billy Badass and you can hit a gnat's ass at 1,000 yards. You can't. There are no very few. I mean, I've shot matches around the world, and I can count on probably one or two hands the number of military trained snipers or police snipers that even go to events, that even put themselves out there, because they just don't want to get shown up by these, you know, fat beer drinking, barbecue eating civilians. And that's really what it is. Some of these guys are, you know, fat, overweight, and don't take care of themselves, but boy, they can shoot. Woo! So we did that for a long time, and that, you know, that lends itself very well to hunting, which I've loved to hunt my entire life. But as I've gotten further in my career and gotten better at shooting, you know, got really to the top of my game, I can honestly say that hunting with a rifle is cheating. We showed up at the ranch that Kiefer and I hunted at. I've been there 4 times now. I remember the first time I showed up, my old boss, who was an Army colonel, is an investor there. He's like, "Hey, you can come out here and shoot some audads." And I met the owner, and he's, you know, skeptical. He's like, "Well, let's see if you can shoot this target at 100 yards." I'm like, "100 yards? Okay." Wow. And then we go out, and he's like, "Man, there's some audads right there at like 250, 300 yards." I'm like, "Hold my beer." Bam, dead. He's like, "How'd you do that?" And, you know, so, and I understand this, guiding my own hunts in Florida for pigs. You know, everybody says they can shoot, but at the end of the day, everybody can shoot on a flat range at a known distance without having to call any wind at big targets. But you put some pressure on them and you put them in the wilderness, and you're shooting uphill, downhill, cross winds, cross canyons. There's a lot of people that can't shoot 200, 300, 400 yards. But hunting where we hunted with Kiefer was amazing. But even at 600 yards, I mean, I took the guy that's now our president of my companies, I took him out there. He doesn't shoot rifles at all. And he whacked an aoudad at 608. All he did was lay down behind the rifle. And I told him, I gave him a wind hold and told him where to shoot. And he launches it, and away it goes. So that's really why I started to stray away from PRS shooting and away from rifle hunting. Was it seemed like every time I'd go somewhere to hunt, you got 5 days to get in camp and find an animal and shoot it. Inevitably, almost every trip, on the day one, when you're kind of scouting it out and you find a big one, bam, he's done. And now I've got 4 days in camp to do nothing. I was like, man, this didn't take anything at all. And I met a couple guys, and they were talking about bow hunting, and honestly, I thought bow hunting wasn't that cool. I didn't really think I'd like it. And I went to our local bow shop. There's 16-year-old kid, the son of the owner. I walk in there. I was like, "Hey, kid, I want you to build me a bow or put a bow together. I don't know shit. I mean, I don't know nothing about bow and arrows. Nothing." I said, "I don't care what brand. I don't care what kind of sights. I don't care what. Just build me the bow that you would love to have." So he takes some measurements and do all this. I come back a week later, and I got the Hoyt X7 or whatever last year's model was, and he made me some Easton 4mm full metal jacket arrows, and I went home and practiced for a couple days, and I was like, "Well, you know, I'm okay with this." I went to Wisconsin. I sat in a deer stand for 6 hours and whacked a monster, my first animal at 41 yards. And I was like, "Well, this ain't hard." And I didn't fully understand how hard it was, because I'd only been shooting bows for 3 or 4 weeks. I went to Wisconsin, smoked a monster, but then I started practicing on a regular basis. And then I decided that instead of hunting animals in Africa with the rifle, I'm going to take my bow. And it was this last trip to Africa where I had to hunt Cape buffalo and an eland with a rifle because on this certain preserve, it's a national park and you can only hunt big game with a rifle there. But then after I killed those two with the 375 H&H, then we went to the private ranch that the PH owns, and that's where I bow hunted for 5 days. And you talk about the most humbling experience ever. A kudu comes in to a watering hole, and I had him dead to rights, just a monster at 20 yards. He was drinking. He was just completely facing me, had full chest, big bodied thing, and the guy didn't want me to shoot him straight on. He said, just wait till he gives you a little quartering or side turn. He didn't give it to me. I mean, as soon as he was drinking, he bolted and gone, and I was like, oh shit, I missed him. Well, a couple minutes later, here comes another one. 37 yards. And when I tell you that bow hunting in Africa can be complicated, it can be complicated in many different ways. One, we as Americans are not accustomed to shooting African game animals, the size of them and the arrow placement. And when I drew down on that kudu, he had drilled into me for 2 days or 3 days. This is where you shoot this African animal with a bow. Guess what happens when I go to full draw? I tune everybody else out. I'm at full draw, 37 yards, and I make the most amazing shot on a whitetail. Perfect shot. But that's not where you shoot a kudu. Like behind the front leg, I shot him 2 inches behind the front leg. It would have been a great shot on a whitetail. Well, he runs away 65 yards. He's bleeding out. We're like, oh, yeah, he's going to breathe. Okay, so there's mistake 1. I shot him in the wrong spot. Mistake 2, he runs to 65 yards, well within reach of putting another arrow in. I just stand there like a dummy, watched him like, oh, he's going to go down. I was so confident. Well, he didn't go down. Then he runs up to 95 yards, and he stood there for an hour until he stopped bleeding, and then he walks off. And we didn't find him we tracked him for 5 or 6 hours the rest of that day, and then the entire next day until we found him. And he succumbed to his wounds, but I had a mental block that I didn't put the arrow where I was supposed to. So then the next day I shot a warthog. I smoked his ass, but 20 yards, and I put the arrow right where it was supposed to be. The third or fourth day, now I'm out hunting Nyala. I really it's the biggest, I think, most prettiest antelope in Africa. And we've seen several big ones, but let me tell you in Africa, everything has eyes. And if it doesn't have eyes, it's got friends that have eyes. So everything's watching you. And finally one comes in. And when I tell you I do everything absolutely right, I did everything wrong on the kudu, and we got him. I did everything absolutely right on the Nyala. I was in a tree stand, 15 yards up, 21-yard shot. And when you do everything right, everything can go wrong. When he heard that bowstring snap and that arrow was on the way, he ducked. And we have it filmed on high-speed video. We measured that he ducked and the arrow hit him 8.5 to 10 inches high up in the scapula. And I've got my bow tuned up to as high, 80 pounds, and shooting 125 grain broadhead. And it smoked him. It sounded like you hit him with a sledgehammer. Away he goes. Arrow's still sticking out of his scapula, and away he goes. We tracked him for 2 hours that night. And then we tracked him for 2 more days and finally found him. But the arrow just barely pierced his scapula and was rubbing against his lung. And that's what did him in. But after 3 days. So it was so humbling. If I'd been shooting with a rifle, that dude would have been dead at 300 yards when he first stuck his nose down. There's no excitement. But when you're bow hunting in Africa, these animals are so big and their internal organs are slightly shifted forward you have to pay so much attention to if you're shooting his right side, is his leg cocked back? And that might give you a different view of his vitals. Is it straight down? Is it forward? Is he quote unquote on? Um, is he drinking water and he's not on, or is there anybody else watching you? It is the most challenging place to bow hunt, and I think that imaginable. I mean, the only place that I would imagine that it's harder is, way out west above the tree line when you're hunting probably sheep, or in Alaska hunting sheep where they can see a long ways and you can see them a long ways. I don't know how these people get that close to these things and make a good shot. So, but if you want something challenging, go to Africa and shoot some of these big animals because they are tough. And when you do everything right, it can still go wrong.
One of our guys just did an African hunt, and he did primarily spot and stalk because he had been there and done kind of the watering hole stuff and for archery, and he was talking about how tough just trying to get on these things in the open plains to get within bow range. It was brutal. That's one thing when I transitioned, and I still hunt both rifle and archery. And I was in Europe for 9 months on a rotation, didn't shoot my bow. So last year I hunted primarily rifle, but this year I'm picking the bow back up. I hunted all rifle last year. What I love about archery is, one, it is so much more challenging because your mind has to be in it the entire time, paying attention to the angles, paying attention to all that. But you see so much more because the hunt lasts so much longer. Because when you shoot one at 300, it's great, and 400. Like, I like being able to have the confidence to take a longer poke at an animal. But you miss so much behavior. You miss so much of that close interaction when you can sit there at 20 yards. Like, I was hunting on the farm that I'm sitting at right now years ago, and I was 17 yards from this buck that I've been looking at on camera for a long time, and I messed it up. My platform on my saddle, I didn't tighten it, and when I shifted to get the shot, it spooked him. But I mean, I could see every detail of him as he walked up, and it's so cool. You don't get that with a live animal with a rifle usually, and it's just that next level of challenge. I love it. So how many animals did you end up taking when you were in Africa?
Uh, in the national park, we shot a Cape buffalo, an eland, a warthog, and an impala, and all that meat. They're having a really bad drought, so I got to shoot a couple extra animals because the villagers needed meat. That's really gratifying to be able to harvest something and then give it to people they're not starving, but they need food. So I shot 4 there, and then I went to the private ranch and I shot the kudu, a warthog, and Nyala. So that trip's 7. Last year I took our daughters. Dana and I took our daughters to Africa. My little 12-year-old, well, she was 11 then. She shot 5 or 6 animals last year. She had a great time. She shot a wildebeest, a zebra, a black impala, a water buck, and something else. So again, it's a fantastic place. But here's what people need to understand about South Africa and Namibia. I primarily hunt Namibia because that's where my friends live. South Africa is much the same, but people like to give people like me a hard time because we hunt these high fence places. That's all South Africa is. The entire country of South Africa is nothing but high fences everywhere. Now, the difference is a lot of these high fence places are 10,000 to 30,000 to 700,000 acres. So it's not confined. We're not talking about 100 acres that's fenced in. The animals are still really hard to find. They're still they act wild. But just know that these different concessions in Africa, the first time I went to South Africa to hunt with my family, we picked out certain animals that we wanted to target. And he's like, oh, we got to go to this ranch to hunt this one. We got to go to this ranch to hunt this one. We got to go to this ranch to hunt this one. I'm like, oh, so the different ranchers specialize in different animals? Yep, basically. So it's a really easy hunt you're gonna see animals. There's animals everywhere. But where I chose to hunt this year is this 700,000 acre national park. It's like hunting in Yellowstone National Park, where it's a state owned or a federal government of Namibia owned, but one PH gets the permit to hunt the entire thing and keep populations in check and shoot animals for villagers. And they do some anti poaching stuff. So when we're talking about wild, there's no fences. There was elephants everywhere. You didn't get out of the truck unless there's 5 or 6 of you, because there's lions walking around, there's elephants walking around, there's Cape buffaloes walking around. Everything there has the ability to kill you, and it also makes hunting more challenging when you're in a really wild environment like that. One time I asked my PH, I'm like, it's going to be really hard to sneak up on that eland up there and smoke him if there's like 6 of us. And he goes, well, we can just take 2, but we don't have anybody to look for lions coming up behind us. I said, well, we'll take 6 then. We're fine.
Yeah, I think I've never been to Africa. I've had a couple opportunities and couldn't schedule it out. And early on in my hunting, I was, I don't know, cautious about it. I didn't know how I felt about the entire thing because I hunt for meat. I mean, that's my primary motivation. I mean, the adventure, and I love being in the outdoors and all that. But not being able to take the meat home's always been kind of a friction point for me. But then when I learned that, like, hey, the meat, one, you get to utilize it while you're in camp, which is super cool. When you're there, you get to eat it and still, and I didn't realize that. And that was something else I thought was awesome. And then that it goes back into to the local populations, and they get to consume the resource and have this. That's something that I think is really, really awesome part of their model. And what a lot of folks don't realize is that in countries that have outlawed hunting in Africa, their populations get decimated because the resource isn't protected by the local population. It becomes, on the agricultural side, it becomes competition. And so they want them gone. And then it also, they don't care about the poachers because they don't need to protect the resources. And when you have such limited resources, if you're not getting a return on your investment, you're not going to put the time, effort, and capital behind it. And so hunting is literally saving the species in Africa. And it's kind of it's hard for people to grasp that. And I know a lot of hunters understand it, but even in the hunting space, people, will still disparage African hunting in the model. But that's the real reason that these species are protected and are able to be maintained, is because of folks from the West or from other countries that come there and hunt, and it's created an entire industry. And I used to be very like black and white with how I wanted to hunt. And the more I've hunted, I'm very fortunate. I've gotten to hunt across the United States. What I've just kind of accepted is, like, whenever I go to a new place, I'm just going to hunt how they hunt. And I'm not going to have these preconceived notions. And then I'll make my decision afterwards, because I used to be super against hunting over bait. And then I was in Georgia and Texas and hunted over bait. And I realized it's not what you think it is. Every animal in the area isn't walking out to eat that corn. I've sat on a lot of bait piles and not seen a single animal. And sometimes it can be a deterrent to big bucks. And so just having an open mind when you go into a new location and not having these preconceived notions. And so I'm just chasing the experiences to hunt how the people in these regions, both in the US and abroad, and I haven't hunted abroad yet, but I want to see that culturally. What are they doing? I mean, I think some of the best hunters on the planet, from the guys that I've talked to, are the PHs in Africa. All the stories I've heard is just how phenomenal these guys are at tracking and at knowing animal behavior and like the intimate knowledge. And I'm excited to be able to have that opportunity to go see those guys in action.
Let me tell you a story that neither the kudu nor the Inyala would have been harvested had it not been for these African Bushmen trackers that work for this PH Emil that I hunted with. These guys are so amazing. And I'm not even saying, like, they are like supermen without capes. We're walking around a sandy, wherever we hunted in Namibia, it's always sand. And I can follow blood pretty well. But when I stop losing the blood trail, they have this Superman vision. They can see these little drops of blood on blades of glass and dried up blood in the dirt, which could be a piece of red particulate matter of some. They know it's blood. Not only that, but I was so amazed that we were the kudu that I shot was traveling after I shot him. He paired up with another kudu. Now I can't tell the difference between. I could tell the difference in the sand between an elephant print and a panther or a cheetah or a big cat. But I can't tell the difference between any of these other plains game. These guys knew which animal they were tracking from these two sets of tracks. They knew that it was this morning. They could tell that this one made an imprint a little bit deeper on one side than the other because they knew he was injured. They were telling me these stories and they were being translated by the PH. Absolutely amazing. We tracked this dude for a couple miles and they found him. Without these tracker guys, we never would have found them until the vultures probably were circling, and Lord knows if we would have even found them then. They have such skill and knowledge. We drove up to a watering hole, the eland that I shot. An eland is one of the spiraled horned creatures there. They're about as big as a dairy cow or bigger. We drove up to a watering hole. There wasn't anything at this watering hole. Not a monkey, not a impala, nothing. It was there was water there, but they'd all run off. When we drove up, they looked down the side of the truck and said, "Oh, there were two eland here, and they went that way. And let's go spot and stalk." I was like, "How do you know that they were just here?" Well, I can tell from the track. Sure shit. We walk a mile. We follow these tracks a mile. I can't see the tracks. Everything looks the same to me. It looks like a bunch of cattle went through there. And we follow these, and sure enough, 20 minutes later, through the 200 yards away, there's two eland standing right there. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. They're absolutely amazing.
That's awesome. I'm excited to be able to go experience that, because when you get to see and be around somebody that's a true master at whatever their craft is, especially in hunting, it's just, you can learn so much. And just watching, what are they looking at? Like, I would have never thought about the angle of the track and oh, this is a wounded animal because he's favoring this side versus that side. Like, that's awesome. But Buck, we busted over an hour here, and I think we feel like we could go for another 2 or 3. So we'll definitely have to do this again. But I really appreciate your time. I'm
going to give you one parting shot.
Yes, sir.
I will honestly tell you that I spent a great deal of my time hunting. Again, I love the relationships. I love being in nature. I love seeing wild game, and I love eating it. But every single idea that I've had for making my business better or how to grow has come from a notebook that was with me when I was in a deer blind, stuck in a tree, watching. Hunting there's something magical about hunting, because most places that I hunt, you don't get cell service, so you can't scroll. So you're just sitting there. It's you, your rifle or your bow, and nature. And you have to be connected to the gray matter, have to be super quiet. So the only thing you can do is think. And every single one of my patents has come from thinking while hunting, coming back to work and executing on that. So it's that downtime that people don't get anymore, with no cell phone, no scrolling, no flipping, no whatever. Disconnect, enjoy nature, harvest something and eat it, and think. And you will thank me.
I love it. It's a good excuse to tell my wife that I got to hunt more so I can make this business bigger. Well, Buck, thank you so much. This was an awesome conversation. I'm already looking forward to the next one. And yeah, this was fun. I cherish the business advice. I can use all I can get at this juncture of my life. So thank you.
Good. All right. Well, I look forward to hearing from you soon. If you want to talk more about whatever we got going on, you know where to find me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our life's going to calm down a little bit here, and I'll definitely be in touch, and we'll get some stuff rolling. To all of our listeners, we'll talk to you next week. As always, we appreciate the hell out of you guys.